Fantasia Fest is in full swing this year, and while I didn't get to go in person, I do have a couple of films that I'm reviewing that are debuting there. First up is The Dead Thing. It's an indie dramatic horror focusing on a very dysfunctional relationship. So should you add this one to your watch list? A young woman lost in a series of meaningless connections falls in love with a charismatic and sensitive man who hides a dark secret that turns her affair into dangerous obsession. So we got this young woman who, for the first several minutes of the movie, is simply shown just swiping through her phone and having what are seemingly one-night stands. She doesn't look particularly happy, just sort of listless and sleepwalking through her life. Now, she's portrayed by the actress Blue Hunt, and for the life of me, I'm not sure we ever learn the character's name. Now, this has a very slow and quiet presence to it. There's very little dialogue in it, just relying more on music, ethereal tones, and inaudible conversations to create a slightly unsettled atmosphere. I mean, it's very artsy. Not so much in look, because the visuals, they're not anything spectacular. I mean, everything is framed well, and it's not like we can't see what's going on most of the time, but it's not shot in a way that I typically see art house films using. This leans way more on just the indie side. Now, eventually, our main character meets a guy, and they hit it off. They spend a chunk of time together, and it's instantly clear that she is interested in seeing him again. We then get to watch an unhealthy and slightly scary obsession take hold. Now, the character, she's frantic and stressed, and that anxiety, it comes through loud and clear. It's uncomfortable to watch, and I was actually getting a bit nervous for her simply because of how fidgety she became as she tried not to text for the 40th time in one day, and then failed miserably. Now, the story does have a twist to it, and it's not saved for the climax. We learn about it about halfway through the film. Now, this then enables the story to shift into more of a thriller and horror, and it still remains quiet in the delivery, with very little ever becoming huge or demonstrative. And I liked where the story was taking us, especially as it examined the theme of obsession. And there are many angles at play that delve into the topic, but none of them come across as pointed or preachy. They're just thematic elements that help to drive the narrative. For the examination into obsession, we obviously watch it through the main character's point of view, where she pines after the dude, and then there's this descent into a very unhealthy state rather quickly. But she also has a roommate who's going through some sort of relationship difficulties, and we get to watch that character work through her own set of obsession. In this instance, it's more of a common vision of infatuation, nothing out of the ordinary, and a standard presentation that really we see in most movies and stories of one yearning after somebody else. And then we watch from the other side of the perspective, with the dude that the main girl hooked up with. Now, this process takes much longer to realize, but once his longing kicks in, he becomes even more unhealthy than the girl. Now, I like the element that then is introduced. This is what helps to shift the narrative from just a drama or maybe slight thriller to one that is more focused on the thrills and then introduces a bit of horror as well. There are some wonderful uses of practical effects and makeup within the latter half of the movie, convincingly creating this persona and vibe that the film is going for. Now, I also appreciate that this isn't an overdone type of thing. The makeup is used only when necessary to push the narrative into certain emotive states, and then it doesn't outstay its welcome. There's also a small use of CGI, and for what it is, it's not bad. I mean, outside of how convincing it may or may not be, I liked what the effect was conveying for the scene. It had dual meanings, both literal and figuratively, and both translated perfectly. Now, for as much of a fan as I am of where the story progresses and how we watch some unraveling of personalities, I'm not really a fan of the pace and manner of the storytelling. This drags unnecessarily, creating a story that flows like molasses. I mean, it's not even like it's uneven. It's just creeping along, prolonging the climax and resolution. And while in certain instances this is the desired outcome, not so much for this movie. Also, what hinders the enjoyment is the style over substance approach to showcasing the characters and their journey. I mean, I'm all for quiet presentations, but when so much of the story feels like a distraction or just a gratuitous meandering, it begins to annoy and then detract from any tension, mystery, anxiety, or engagement with the plot and characters. And I appreciate what's at the core of this tale. It has a fresh look at an obsession story, but the way the film is delivered keeps us from being overly enjoyable. For a 94-minute movie, it feels like it was well over 2 hours, extending the storytelling past the point of effectiveness. The makeup and effects are sparingly but efficiently utilized, and the somber, ominous tone of the narrative builds the unsettled atmosphere. Unfortunately, the negatives outweigh the positives in this one, leading to a lackluster and lifeless story that doesn't realize its chilling potential. There's a lot of sex and nudity, a bunch of profanity, and some violence. I give The Dead Thing 2.5 out of 5 couches. So what's a great movie that focuses on obsession and you don't get to say Fatal Attraction? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.